All right, so I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Heather Knust. I'm the Director of Budget for the School District of Palm Beach County. Charter School Fiscal Oversight and Monitoring falls under my department. I also want to introduce Sharon Kovner. She's in the back. Sharon Kovner is responsible for all the benchmarks, so I'm sure you appreciate all of her notes and communication that you get. Sharon Kovner reports to William Dufresne. William Dufresne is the charter school financial specialist. He's been in that role now for over a year. He is your go-to person. So if you have any questions, concerns, direct them to William. If he doesn't have the answer related to fiscal oversight, just related to financials, but if William doesn't have the answer, then he will make sure to get it for you. The purpose of the meeting today is really to comply with statute. We're required as a district sponsor of charter schools to have an annual fiscal training. And if you remember this past year, we did it in November. And we did it as part of just your normal charter school monthly meeting. What we found was that really wasn't enough time. We weren't able to get into any specifics. And it was also in the fall. There are a lot of compliance requirements that are required over the summer months for the prior fiscal year as well as the upcoming school year. And so we thought it would be more beneficial to have this presentation in June prior to the start of the fiscal year to make you aware of what the changes are so you're able to prepare for them and you actually understand the intent as to why we're doing what we're doing. And what you'll see is we're going to continue that focus of compliance, fiscal management, and oversight, since that really is our role. That not only you telling us that you have a policy and procedure, but having us actually verify that you've actually implemented it. There's also two new legislative requirements, or not new, but there were some changes related to the Safe Schools allocation, as well as mental health, which William is going to get into as part of his presentation. But you all should have received a letter from the school district that was sent out on June 5th regarding Safe Schools. Although it's not a financial, I guess it's not a financial legislative concern, it does have a fiscal impact. Because in that letter, it states that you have 4 options to comply with the Safe Schools allocation funding, where you have to choose one of the 4 options. And if you choose to have a school security officer or contracted police, you're required to have 1 per school. You can't share them any longer, and they have to be there from the start of school to the end of school, and your school is responsible for covering the cost of that. So you need to look at those 4 options, understand Guardian is one of those options. I'm not a specialist, so go back and look at the letter that was sent out, but there are 4 options in there. You are required to select one, and you can no longer share if that is something that you were doing with contracted security services. The other area I want to highlight is mental health. So with the mental health allocation plan, charter schools have the option to either elect to be part of the school district mental health plan or to come up with your own mental health plan. My personal opinion is, and this needs to be approved by your board prior to August 1st, so this is something that's also time sensitive. But I would just say my personal opinion is if you elect to be part of the school district plan, you're going to be limited to whatever the options are within the school district mental health plan. We will still be passing the funds through to you. You would have to tell us which of the items within the school district plan you plan to implement at your school site. And then we would then be following up throughout the year to ensure that you're actually doing those activities you said that you were going to do and you're spending the monies how you said you were going to spend them. So if you do your own plan, you have a lot more flexibility as to what you would do and operate at your school site within that mental health allocation plan. So keep in mind that that's very time sensitive as well. And I know that Joe DePasquale is working on communication to all the schools as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to William. He's worked very hard to make this presentation comprehensive. And another word for comprehensive is it's long. So, I mean, if you have questions, just know that without any questions, it's probably going to take an hour and a half. So we're going to try to get this done within, the 3-hour time frame that we have set aside, because I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions. All right, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to apologize in advance. Public speaking is not one of my strong suits. So I may stutter, I may stammer, I may lose my position, but please bear with me. So the general topics for discussion today include everybody's favorite charter tool benchmarks, the handful that we still have for this remaining fiscal year 2019, and then upcoming fiscal year 20. Then we'll also discuss financial monitoring, which includes monthly or quarterly financial statements, those financial checklists, and of course, budget amendments if they are applicable. And annual financial reviews, possible changes that were talked about at the last fiscal training in November, as well as criteria, things that may be changing in the upcoming fiscal year. Then we'll dive into federal and state grants, the resources available and the requirements for those grants. Understanding the charter school revenue worksheet, we'll go over that, any changes to possible categoricals, base student allocation, district cost differential, and then we'll end with, again, resources available and the key takeaways from this meeting. Also, if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Sharon Kovner has a microphone, and she will pass it around. This is being recorded, and we'll be able to share a YouTube link at the end, so you can rewatch it if you would like. There were some schools who were unable to attend, so that's why we're doing this. And we'll get started. So leading off with the remaining fiscal year 2019 charter school benchmarks. The non-capitalized personal property inventory. This was discussed at the previous meeting, and a letter was sent out to all the schools in December. This is basically, we're just asking for a list of all personal property with a single item, so purchase price, so a single item. So a chair that, say, is over $100, that would be included, but not 5 chairs that, were $100 total to purchase. So between $100 and $999 that has a useful life of more than 1 year would be recorded on that sheet. We've provided a template to the benchmark. It's basically just an adjusted template of the annual property inventory. It just asks for what the item is, the original purchase price, the funding that was used to purchase it, FEFP, grant funds, etc., and the physical location. You don't have to use the template. We suggest you do so, but you can use your own template just as long as it has the same information on it. And also, please do not include consumables. We're not looking for paper, pens. We're not asking you to go through your storerooms and record every single item, every single paper clip. 1 second, Dr. Banks.
Okay. I'll just use my school as an example. Things that I've donated to my school, but I'm earmarking it to, when I leave, where it is to go to other charter schools.
Okay. As long as you note the funding source that it came from. So if you donated an item.
If it came from Emma Banks.
Then you would note that on the sheet.
Okay.
So you would note on there that it was a donation from you. It was not part of FEFP. You can't direct where it's going to go to, but it would go back to you upon closure of the school. Or.
So I can't donate it to another charter school?
I would honestly have to look into that. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Because you can do transfers between schools, but let's find out an answer to that.
I'm not using your own money. This is money.
No, I know, and it wouldn't go back to us. That's why we want to have the actual how it was purchased, because if it is foundation money and your foundation is not a component unit of your school, then that asset would stay with the foundation. It would not revert back to the district upon closure. So that's why that funding piece is the most important.
We were sent a template that just had the numbers. It didn't have that the money in that had to be included. Listing the number of tables, chairs, cabinets. We've been here 17 years. 5 of the chairs could have come from, how?
No. And it's just your best estimate now, since this is a baseline.
Can we just give a total, of everything we've spent towards that? And not say, okay, these 5 chairs and this classroom were in this, because they've all been intermixed.
You just have to do the best that you can. I mean, the whole purpose of that is if you don't identify a funding source on the form, then we're going to assume that it's FEFP. So if you don't put on there that it's foundation or that it's a donation from a particular person that's outside of FEFP, we'll assume it's FEFP. So you don't, if that's helpful. And do the best that you can. This is a baseline. It's something that can be updated throughout the year. You can fix it next year. It really is just a baseline.
I'm wondering if we can group things together, like an entire classroom, or group things like by a unit, such as like a board room with the desk and tables and all of that as a unit. Is that acceptable?
I would say no, because they move around and they're going to go to different classrooms, and they might be in the boardroom now, but they could be moved to an office. And so you would say this boardroom, so it's just counting the chair, and it's assuming, I mean, we're at this initial time, since this is a baseline, we're not requiring any invoices. We're just saying do the best that you can. So we're going to go by whatever you provide to us. So if you have 15 chairs and you think that they cost $150 each, we're not going to then say, give us the invoice so that we can look at it. Well, it depends on what it is. So in some cases, like a...
Yeah. Oh, thanks. That's okay.
But normally, if you're going to use the group 50 chairs together, and you're going to say these 50 chairs cost $5,000, so we're now going to capitalize them and track them. We as a district don't do it that way. We look at individual items and the individual purchase price, because if you take those 50 chairs, and those 50 chairs all cost, $99, or I guess for capitalization thresholds, say they all cost $500, so it's below the 1,000. And you now are going to say that combined they're over the $1,000 limit for tracking purposes. You have to tag each individual one. You don't just tag. There's no way that you can tag one for 50. So you have a choice as to whether you're going to consolidate them and use that as your capitalization policy. Our capitalization policy is by individual item, and that's your choice. But if you do choose it by consolidating them, you have to tag each thing anyway. Yeah, you can still capitalize them, but it comes down to the tracking part of it. No, if they're on your I really care most about the ones that are over the $1,000. That's the one we're still going to be looking at, and we're still going to make sure reconciles to your audited financial statements. The other one, I'm going to take whatever you give us.
So if we had already done it on the inventory, already consolidated them, but looking at this, I know that a lot of my chairs that were in that original capitalized number were under $100. Can I now break them out and redo the capitalization list? Because otherwise it's not going to match.
No, if it's on your one that's capitalized, everything over $1,000, you leave those alone. It's completely separate.
This is something different in addition to the...
This is everything that's not already on that one that's the capitalized one that you're using for tracking purposes. And that's why I want it as two separate lists. Because really, truly, what's most important to me is the one that's reconciled to your audited financial statements, the one that's everything that's over $1,000. The other one is really just a baseline, so we have an idea of what's at your school site. So two completely separate lists.
I'm looking at where it says useful life of greater than 1 year. I am currently going through the process of looking at a list that has been in existence since 2002. I'm working with my auditor now, because from my understanding, some of these items have depreciated and some of them are been discarded. So we're trying to reconcile our inventory list. So at this point, I'm at the beginning of what you're discussing. And the recommendation was for this year, to prepare the inventory list to be able to remove or discard those items, what is the actual date? How far back can we go from that window? I'm talking about 2002.
Your issue is a different issue.
Okay.
And so I think that's something we need to talk about offline, because it seems like you're going back and you're redoing your list for everything that's over the $1,000. I wasn't asking for, that's a completely different issue. So please contact William afterwards, and we'll assist you with that. All right, so hopefully, I don't want to spend all of our time on this like we did last time. So if you have any other questions or need clarification, please reach out to William, and we'll answer those questions.
All righty, moving on. For the end of fiscal year 2019, we have the May monthly financial statements, the checklist, and any budget amendments if applicable. Remember, that's due by June 30th. And then for grant reporting, any final grant reimbursement requests, monthly grant reimbursement requests from IDEA, Title I, any reimbursement requests for the Educational Facility Security Grant for expenditures from fiscal year 19. We understand the grant goes next year and then the following year until January 31st, but we're just asking for expenditures from this current year. And then as well, the Restart Grant, your reimbursement submission should be submitted by June 30th, because that grant is ending. So please make sure if you, yes, ma'am.
With the 7,000, would the difference move forward into the following year?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great.
We just want to make sure the expenses are recorded in the correct fiscal year. So I mentioned the Restart Grant, and yep, that's it for grant reporting. If you did elect to participate in the Restart Grant, please make sure you submit your reimbursement request. We've only received 2 so far, and they're due June 30th. All right, so now we'll move on to fiscal year 2020. Now these are just your general recurring benchmarks, your monthly and quarterly financial statements, financial checklist, and budget amendments. Please make sure you submit your financial checklists along with your financial statements. I know it's few and far between, but I still notice Sharon has to send notes requesting you to submit the checklist. The checklist is there for a reason. We want to make sure it has the 2 signatures on it. We want to make sure that 2 people are looking at the financials. One prepared them, one reviewed it. The principal's signature is recommended so that the principal has an idea of what's going on, and then also to possibly report any deteriorating financial condition that could be an issue. And then we also have the grant reporting, monthly, quarterly. We would suggest that you submit monthly reimbursement requests. If you wait until the very end of the year and we find issues with the reimbursement request, you may lose those funds. So it's better to submit them monthly. We find an issue in the beginning, we can note the issue and it can be fixed, and it doesn't affect the rest of the year. So please take that into consideration. So now we'll move on to the specific benchmarks. So we have 2 for July 15th. Your annual contract for accounting services. If your accountant is an employee of the school, just upload a copy of their resume. So we need for that the ACH deposit form, which we require you to submit every year. Now July 31st, your board-approved adopted budgets. I know it seems like we keep hassling you to provide, official minutes on either the approved budget, the minutes, or even a resolution. Just have your board members sign it, just so we know that they were presented it, they know about it, and they approved it.
15 year, I have to revise my FY19 deposit form. I mean,
No, the form itself was revised, but we ask you to do it every year to make sure that everything's current, there's no issues, and that when we go to make the payment, say in July, that you receive the payment and there's no issues, or in August.
Or are you sending it, is it on the?
The ACH is on the Charter Fiscal Oversight webpage, and I believe it's on Charter Tools as well, yes. So then we have our annual audit contract, basically the contract for your auditors to audit your fiscal year 2019 financial statements. Then you'll also need to upload your FY19 general ledger and your program cost report. We'll go over a few common issues that we've noted this past year. And also something new is we would like you to upload, if you do have a management company and it applies, to upload a full copy of the most current management agreement. My office, I will send out a letter to all the schools requesting this within the next week or two, but it'll be due July 31st. And moving on to August 1st, we have your FY19 unaudited financial statements. There have been some changes to the template, which we will go further into detail in the presentation. September 7th, Florida Classroom Supply Assistance. Now, one of the most important ones is for September 30th. So this is where you will submit your final, yes.
Will you send this to the Charter Department? William, can you send this to the Charter Department and we'll distribute this PowerPoint because some of the folks are asking for a copy?
Of course.
It's actually going to be available on our website, as well as a link to this presentation.
So September 30th,
You know when this is going to roll over? Because I know a lot of times it's like until like the 10th, and then something's due the 15th. Those two things are due the 15th, and I'm on vacation that week, so it becomes very hard to.
I believe it rolls here on the 7th, the 8th.
Actually, Jessica rolls it over, and it is about the second week.
We'll find out. We'll get the answer for you and send that out. No, I understand, and we did try to adjust some of the timelines because of that, and we pushed off some that used to be on the 1st in order to make it later so we wouldn't have that issue.
As long as you can at least give us a couple days to get that.
Okay, yeah, so we'll get that answer from the Charter Department.
All right, so on September 30th is when you would upload your final fiscal year 2019 amended budget. This is the budget that makes sure all of your expenditure line items are under 100%. You would also upload your FY19 annual audit financial statements, as well as your school's management or your board's management response letter, and minutes showing that the board approved it. Once again, they can sign the board minutes, they can sign the response letter, et cetera, just to know that the board was presented the audit, they're aware of it. And then there are some changes regarding the audit that we'll discuss further along in the presentation. And then the FY19 annual property inventory form. So I believe this was a big issue this year. Please make sure when you're doing your annual property inventories that they comply with 69I-73. So that and basically the template that we provide on the benchmark lists all the information that we need. So a description of the item, a tag number, the funds that were used, the original purchase price, its useful life, and the physical location. Those are all requirements. And we will reject it and send it back and have you resubmit it if we find issues. And then September 30th, you can just re-upload the one you submitted on June 30th, the non-capitalized inventory, just so we have them together. Now, for October 15th, I know the date says October 15th, but per the statute, Florida Classroom Supply Assistance must be paid to the teachers by September 30th. So please make sure that happens. If you pay them after that, then it did not comply. So we come to March 31st. This is when you will submit your Form 990 tax form or an extension, and then you have until May 15th to submit your Form 990. And finally, on April 15th, verification for best and brightest was paid to your teachers. There are some changes going into FY20, and again, I will discuss it as we get further into the presentation. Any questions so far? Nope. All right. So these are just some of the common issues that we noted this past year with the cost report. A program contains FTE, but the total program cost is 0. When you're filling out your cost report and you're putting in your cost for your individual programs, you can look at the June 2019 charter school payment sheet for the FTE numbers for those programs. So if you have FTE in that program, the total program cost should not be 0. Program total cost per FTE is high or low. That's more something that we see when we submit the information into the cost report, and then it kicks back based on a threshold. Basic program total cost per FTE is greater than ESE program total cost per FTE. So please make sure you're looking at the total cost for these programs. you're comparing your FTE from the June payment sheet. Generally, the ESE program total cost should be higher than the general program total cost, unless you know for your particular school that's not the case, in which case you just provide us with an explanation. And then finally, under the special revenue funds, there have been no direct costs reported, and there should be direct costs reported under the special revenue funds.
I just wanted to also just point out one thing, is that you can do a reasonableness test for the program total cost per FTE, whether it's too high or too low. If you have a regular, 101 student and their cost per student is $50,000, you obviously know something's wrong because you were only paid around $7,000 for that kid. So although, when we actually enter it, it might come up as higher or low. You might not have identified it. At least do a reasonableness test first before you submit it to us, because we have had schools with a regular student have a per student cost of $50,000, which that isn't right. So just take a look at your information before you submit it. It's not, the question was if there's a certain percentage that we apply. It's not something that we apply. It's applied by the system that we enter it in for DOE. And so that's why we can't give you an exact dollar amount as to what it is, because we have to wait until after it's entered in. But you can at least do a reasonableness test compared to what you're receiving for that student.
All right, now we'll discuss the changes to the unaudited financial statements. So the template that you'll be filling out this year had changes that included new accounts, Schedule K excerpts, a schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or a CFA, the Safe School Expenditure Survey. You filled out the one for 2017, 2018 in March of this year. We're attaching it to the unaudited financial statements so we can have it done and be out of the way instead of getting a surprise from DOE and have you do it in 2 weeks and it has to be submitted. And then as well as a comprehensive research-based reading plan survey. So this is the survey. You submit a reading plan to receive your reading allocation categorical. So this is basically just a survey that you have to fill out to show where you applied those categorical funds and show that you followed your plan that you submitted. And the template is also available on the district website as well as Charter Tools. So as far as the new accounts go, I'm not going to get very specific. I just included just collapsed columns and rows to show that these had been added when compared to the old template. So this is for the statement of net position. This is for the balance sheet for governmental funds. We have revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for governmental funds. This compares budgeted and actual for the general fund. And then this is for the budgeted and actual for capital projects fund. So now moving into the Schedule K excerpts. This will be the first item on the schedule. So this is basically a schedule of loans or transfers to charter schools or other entities. So if your school has made a loan or a transfer to another school, you would put that on this schedule, not if the school received one. Then we have Schedule K11. So this is a schedule of short and long-term liabilities. So on here you have your notes payable, bonds payable, recoverable grants. You have those, pension liability. So basically you would just include all those on here, whether they're short-term or long-term, payments that you've made in 2018, 2019, and then what's due in 1 year. So schedule of categorical programs. So this is just basically you filling out the amount of each categorical that you've received, amount of funding, and then how much you've spent, any that you've returned to FDOE, and then how many you have remaining at the end of the year. So June 30th of 2019. And please make sure that you are using these categorical funds for that categorical. So take Safe School funds, your Safe Schools allocation. Please make sure you're using that for eligible Safe School allocation purposes. So this only applies if you do have a management company. This is basically for your roughly a yearly payment to the management company. So which funds did you use? What was your original or amended budgeted management fee? If the amount of the fee actually paid differs from your budget, please provide an explanation as to why. A basis of the fee, so if the fee is based on a percentage of FEFP revenue, if it's per student, or if it's just a flat fee, please note that there. And then the actual fee that's charged. So if it's a percentage, if it's 4%, 5%, $450 per student fee, just please note that there. I'm not sure if this applies to any of the schools in here, but you would only fill this out if you have a voluntary pre-K program. I don't think that applies though, but it's there just in case. So now we move on to the CFA. So we've already populated this schedule with the most common federal grants, Title I, IDEA, the National School Lunch Program. If there's any on this, if you receive a federal award that's not on this list, please just add it, and then you'll record the expenditures for the federal award. Now, the Safe Schools Expenditure Survey. This is roughly the same survey from last year that we had you fill out in March. The date's just been changed, and I only made one revision in the middle section regarding the number of officers, because I felt that could get confusing. So the categories are the same. Please just record the amount of expenditures for the allocation in each of the activities. It's included with the unaudited financial statements. It's on the Excel sheet.
It's on which one?
It's on the Excel, the unaudited financial statement template.
Okay.
And if we spent more than that on the safe school, if we spent more on officers than we got in safe school allocation, you just want to see the safe school allocation?
Yeah,
or
this
you want
is
to see
just
what
for
we
the
actually
safe
do?
schools allocation
Okay.
itself.
And I also want to note that we do expect this template to change. This is the most recent template that we have from the Florida Department of Education, but if you remember, we sent this template out to you all in, I think it was March of this year for FY18. So we expect that we're probably going to be getting a revised template probably sometime in March for FY19. But this is the best one that we have as of now, so we're asking you to complete it. If there are any changes, we will have to send it back out to you to update, but that might not be until the spring.
So I have a question when you're done about the safe schools and certain extra money. So once you're done, I have a question on that.
Okay.
At the end of the presentation or the end of the survey?
At the end of the presentation, I don't want to interrupt him because it's going to be a lungy question.
Okay.
Understood. So roughly these are, sorry. Just like the previous survey, just the school activities, the categories are the same. And then you'll put your total expenditures, which should be your total allocation. So you should be able to look at the June charter school payment sheet under that categorical that shows you the amount you received for fiscal year 2019, and that should equal your total expenditures. This is the only section that was really changed. It had two columns, number of officers and number of schools served by those officers. We just put it to number of officers. So if you're in elementary school, you would just put one. We do know that there's instances where two charter schools share the same campus. For that, you would please circle yes, just so we know. Other than that, each school should have one officer, regardless of the grade level. And this is where, sorry, for the officer, this is where you put the funding. So the first one is safe school funds. That's your safe school allocation. So if your officer cost you $100,000 and your safe schools allocation was $10,000, that would be 10% of the salary was covered by the safe school allocation. Only fill out for like the police department, county sheriffs, or federal grants if that entity paid for the officer. Not if you have an officer, not if you have a sheriff's officer. Only if the sheriff's department helped pay for the officer. And then we have general district funds, which is FEFP, which for the most part, most schools would have as the remaining percentage. I do know that there are some schools that their foundation helped pay for their officer. So any other items that aren't listed, you would put under other and just put a description. So this is the research-based reading plan survey. Basically charter schools, I believe, submit their reading plans to Diana Fetterman. She's Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. And you fill out this survey to show where you spent your reading allocation categorical funds and to show that it was in line with the reading plan that you submitted. So you have salaries and benefits for reading coaches and reading intervention teachers, professional development based on grade, assessment costs, program and materials costs, summer reading camps, and then the total at the bottom. So for the total reading funds available for the current year, that would be how much you received for the reading categorical allocation, your total expenditures, how much of that you expensed, or how much of the reading allocation you used, and then if you have any left over, the carry forward for next year. Then any remaining funds should be zero.
And if there, I just want to make a note, if it's not zero, then that should match up with the categorical sheet that shows the amount that's going to be carried forward to the next year to be used for whatever is in line with your CRP program. So we'll make sure that those two reconcile, because that's something we'll be looking at.
And again, if you have any questions on these, feel free to email us, call us. I'm always available. So some of the changes going into FY20 continued. Now for annual audits, the audit report will be rejected if the school is identified as a component unit of the school district. The school district, in agreement with the school district's auditors, have determined that charter schools are not component units of the school district. If your auditor does not want to say that they determine that the charter school is not a component unit, they can put in the audit report that the district and our auditors do not consider charter schools component units. And then if your auditor is not a member of the Governmental Audit Quality Center, that'll be reported to the School District Audit Committee. And as mentioned before, there were changes with the Best and Brightest program. It is,
Clarify that a little more, I just asking for clarification, the component unit part.
The school district, probably 5 years ago, we determined that when GASB 61 was released, that charter schools are not component units of the school district. There are other districts in the state as well. Miami-Dade agrees as well. What we noticed when reviewing the annual financial statements, some of the charter schools have appropriately included within their audit reports that you're not component units of the school district, but some of the others have not. They still include us as component units, include charter schools as component units. I assume it's because they probably do audits in other districts, and it is up to whatever the fact pattern is within that district as to whether charter schools are deemed to be component units. So we just need to make sure that it's consistent, and because it is misleading to the reader if they were to read your financial statements and have it state that you're a component unit when in fact the school district has determined you're not.
and as mentioned previously, there were changes to the Best and Brightest program. So starting next year, Best and Brightest is no longer a state grant. It'll be included in FEFP. We're still unsure of how the payments will be made, if they'll be made monthly, but most likely it'll just be a lump sum how it is now. It'll just be done via FEFP. So benchmark reminders. Whenever you upload financial documents to Charter Tools, please make sure to mark the benchmark as ready for review so that we know that something has been uploaded and we can review it. If you think a benchmark does not apply to your school, such as you're high performing and you only have to submit quarterly financial statements, you would basically request an exemption for the other months where you did not submit financial statements. If a benchmark is locked and you cannot upload or fix anything, please contact Sharon Kovner in the back and she'll open it for you. And then please respond to notes in Charter Tools. I've seen it multiple times this year where there have been notes upon notes upon notes from the district and there have been no response, no uploads. So just please respond to the notes, even if you don't respond in Charter Tools, an email or a phone call, just so we know that there's maybe some other kind of issue. So now we'll move on to financial monitoring. So the district has the responsibility for assessing financial condition. So basically, this involves timely notification of charter school boards of any financial concerns that may need to be addressed. So deteriorating financial conditions include actual enrollment is less than 70% of what has been budgeted or projected. Expenses exceed budgeted expenses for 3 consecutive months. So basically, you'll take your annual budgeted expenses and you'll divide it by 12, and that will give you your monthly expenditures. And when expenses exceed revenues for a period of 3 consecutive months, and there is not sufficient fund balance to compensate. So if your expenses have exceeded revenues and your fund balance is, say, $1,000 at the end of the month, we're going to send you a letter because we're not sure if the next month your expenses are going to exceed your revenues, and then you'll be operating at a fund balance deficit. If any of these items occur, and it's marked on the financial checklist, which we'll review shortly, but if you can provide enough detail explaining why that is and why it shouldn't be considered a deteriorating financial condition, the better. Because if you provide us a detailed explanation and we realize, yes, they're right, it's not a deteriorating financial condition, it just may look that way, we're not going to send you a letter, we're not going to request a corrective action plan. But if you don't provide an explanation or a very general one and we have to ask for more detail, odds are we're going to be sending you a letter. The district received an audit finding this year because we're not complying with statute in regards to corrective action plans. Starting from the day we send a letter to your school's board, we have 30 days to come to an agreement on a corrective action plan, or we have to defer to the Commissioner of Education. We've gone back and forth with various schools. We've tried to give schools more time to complete it, but because of this audit finding, once we hit the 30-day mark, we're going to defer to the Department of Education to determine the components of the plan. So now we come to the financial checklist. It hasn't been revised since last November. Again, as previously mentioned, it requires 2 signatures, the person who prepared the financial statements and then the person who reviewed them. The more people looking at it, the easier it is to find any possible mistakes. We do suggest that the principal sign it as well. And then if any of the items 9, 10, 11, or 12 are checked off, which are the criteria for a deteriorating financial condition, the board chair will be required to sign as well. And when you submit the financial checklist and your monthly financials, if you've marked no on 9 through 12, which means it appears that you meet the criteria for a deteriorating financial condition, you would also submit your explanation. You can provide it as a separate document. Like I said, the more detailed, the better. Now we'll cover common mistakes on the monthly financial statements. I'll just do a brief run through. I don't have to get super specific. But transfers in and out not matching. Fund balance hasn't been updated based on your audited financial statements starting in October. Your balance sheet doesn't balance, so your assets does not equal your liabilities and fund balance. Financial statements do not reflect actual FTE. This brings up a very important point that also has to do with the financial checklist. If your expenditure or if your expenses are going to exceed revenues for 3 consecutive months, but your actual FTE is higher than what you're being paid for by the district than your FEFP, you can record a receivable for that so that your expenses do not exceed your revenues. Hence, we would not have to send you a letter, we would not have to ask you about it. So if that is the case, please remember you have that option. Not providing explanations for significant variations. Like I said, the more explanations in detail you can provide, the better. Loans and transfers. Anytime the school receives a loan or a recoverable grant, the month that it shows on the financial statements, you need to submit the board-approved agreement and minutes for that loan. Now, loans and transfers made to schools outside of Palm Beach County. Per the charter school statute, current unrestricted assets can be shared between related schools within the district, but they cannot cross district lines. So a school operating in Palm Beach County cannot loan current unrestricted assets to a school in Broward County. That is the case. The funds need to be returned immediately. And also not reporting grants in a separate fund or not reporting capital projects in a separate fund. So then we come to common mistakes regarding special revenue. So this includes IDEA, Title I, school food service. They should all be recorded in that special revenue fund on the monthly financial statements. Basically, they are restricted for specific expenditures and specific purposes. That is why they are considered special revenue, and that is why they are reported separately. And please make sure that your special revenue is budgeted appropriately at the beginning of the year. Now, as far as capital outlay is concerned, please refer to the capital outlay statute listed here for eligible uses. For those expenditures that do not meet the definition to be recorded in capital outlay would be transferred to the general fund, but any unspent funds at the end of the year need to be transferred back to the capital outlay fund. Now, for the Educational Facility Security Grant, as far as reporting goes, this is straight from a memo from the Department of Education of how to record it properly. The funds will be recorded in capital project funds, other capital projects, under that revenue account 3399, miscellaneous state revenues. But if the expenditures are not capitalized, they'll be transferred to the general fund and be recorded under current expenditures, function 7410. Now we come to the annual financial review in the 5 areas. An updated template was sent out along with a letter basically discussing annual financial reviews, what would be covered, the rating system, which we will also discuss further into the presentation. But these are basically the 5 areas that the review covers. So budget preparation includes, do you have policies and procedures in place for budget preparation? Did you submit your budget on time? Board approved? Do you submit amendments on time? Then we come to financial accounting. Financial policies and procedures, and are they being implemented? We had asked charter schools to submit copies of canceled checks from October and February for this fiscal year. And basically, we looked at your financial policies and procedures to see what the requirements were for signatures on those checks. And we noted any time that a check over a certain amount or for a specific purpose that was supposed to have dual signatures did not. And that will be noted on the annual financial review. This also includes AP agings, all of your notes, loans, and lines of credit. Are you under a financial corrective action plan? And then any material weaknesses or deficiencies identified by your auditor in the annual audit, as well as complying with benchmarks. Then we have grant accounting. Do you have grant accounting policies and procedures in place? Are they being implemented? Are your grant funds being reported in a separate fund? And then are your benchmarks being submitted timely? And transparency. Your auditor should be checking your website to make sure that it has your annual financial audits, your annual budget, and the board minutes, at least for that fiscal year. I actually did a review recently and found that there are schools that have not updated their websites. I believe one school's most current audit was fiscal year 16, but their auditor noted that everything is updated. So please make sure, double check your websites and that you have everything required by statute. And finally, financial viability. This is determined by financial indicators, your cash flow, your fund balance, and steady FTE counts. Basically, we take your audited financial statements, we take the FTE surveys, and we look at the financial indicators over the past several years, and it'll give us basically an idea of how the charter school is doing financially, such as like amount of debt, is that increasing or decreasing, fund balance, cash flow. And for those schools that receive an annual financial review, you will also receive a copy of your financial indicators.
And I just wanted to make a note there. The financial indicators we use are the same ones that are used by the Florida Auditor General. And so the Florida Auditor General does an annual review of all charter schools as well. So if you want to see which ones they are, you can go to their website and you can recalculate them as well. They're going to be part of your annual review, but if you want to see what they are in advance, you can go and look at the Florida Auditor General website.
Okay, now we have the possible ratings for the annual financial review. Meets the standard. We decided to change the criteria because we believe that if you submitted your budget, 3 days late and everything else is great, you have your financial indicators show good financial health, you've submitted everything else timely, that we shouldn't hold that against you. So basically, it'll be based on the severity of noncompliance that will be assessed. So if we see that, you're constantly late submitting items, there's issues of financial health or other areas, that's when you would be put as partially meets the standard. So partially meets the standard is no more than 10 indicators are rated as noncompliant. And then does not meet the standard is more than 10 indicators are rated as noncompliant. You meet the criteria for a deteriorating financial condition, or there is a serious issue of noncompliance identified by the district. So beginning with the fiscal year 2019 annual financial review, those will be released no later than December 13th of 2019. Charter schools that receive a rating of partially meets or does not meet the standard will be required to prepare and present a corrective action plan to district staff. Basically just how are you going to fix the issues that we've identified in the annual review. And then depending on the nature and the severity of noncompliance, you may also be required to present the plan to the school board for review and approval.
Financial review, and how come we have to present something to your school board, and then when we have questions about when a person comes to my school and do a charter review, and I have questions about their duties and what they do, it doesn't go up to the school board? So I have a big questions on those two.
It depends on the nature of the noncompliance.
Well, and keep in mind, this is a financial corrective action plan. This is not a academic corrective action plan.
Right.
So, that is a question that you can direct to the charter school department.
They did. So I have
Okay.
to go up to the top.
And the plan must be presented within 60 days of the notice of noncompliance from the district. So unless we, yes, ma'am.
On the situation where if the school does have to present to the school board, after that presentation is done and after those issues have been addressed by the school, what are the contingencies after that? Or is there some sort of a time frame with which you're under some heavier scrutiny, or is there some kind of a situation where you immediately have been released of any sort of issues with this, and what happens after that happens?
For most corrective action plans, they're in place for a year. But it is on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the deficiencies identified are. But a normal financial corrective action plan is in place for at least a year, or if it starts in the middle of a school year, a whole entire school year. So it could potentially be a year and a half, so that we could see that any changes have been made.
You have to report to those concerns, or
It will be specific to the actual concerns that are identified.
And now, how are schools selected for annual financial reviews? I'm not going to read every item on this list, but most of them make sense. Schools in the first years of operation, you have audit findings, expenditures are constantly exceeding revenues, issues with grant reimbursements, or not providing information timely or uploading items to charter tools timely. So now we'll discuss federal and state grant resources and requirements. So charter schools must comply with district, state, and federal requirements in regards to their grants and their own financial policies and procedures as well. So as far as the district is concerned, we have more strict, dates for the award and reimbursement, And these are available on the Charter Fiscal Oversight webpage. But basically, you need to go with the most restrictive requirement. So as far as the state goes, the resources available are the Green Book, and then we also have a link in the presentation that would take you to the Florida Department of Education for their grants and management page. And then for federal, we have the Uniform Grant Guidance, which was effective in 2014. And then we also have a link in the PowerPoint for that. And in addition, we have the Federal Compliance Supplement, which we'll briefly discuss.
And I just wanted to mention that link there for the Uniform Grant Guidance. There's a lot more information on that webpage from the Federal Department of Education, more than just the Uniform Grant Guidance. They provide detailed PowerPoint presentations of what is procurement, what do we need to do for procurement, how do you do bids and whatnot. But you have to be careful, because just like our district requirements can be more stringent than the federal requirements, the state's requirements are usually more stringent than the federal requirements. You have to follow what's most restrictive. And so you have to make sure that even though there might be a certain threshold for federal purposes, for example, with inventory, the federal guidance is that you only need to capitalize and track everything over $5,000. We know, though, in the state of Florida, that requirement is $1,000. So you're required to follow the state guidance of $1,000. So you need to make sure that whatever your policies and procedures are, they follow the most restrictive guidance. And know that there are a lot of resources out there for you to utilize and look at.
So here we have a list of the district due dates. So entitled and competitive grants are reimbursement based. So last day to issue purchase orders is 30 days prior to the grant project ending date. So if the grant was scheduled to end on June 30th, the last day for you to issue purchase orders would be May 31st. The goods and services must be received or performed by the end of the grant project. So those goods and services must be received by June 30th. The invoices for those goods and services must be paid within 15 days of the ending. So July 15th would be the last day to pay for those goods and services. And then the reimbursement must be requested by the same date. So you have up until 15 days after the end of the grant to submit the reimbursement request. Any budget amendments must be approved by the Florida Department of Education no later than 60 calendar days before the end of the grant. And as mentioned previously, please do not wait until the end of the fiscal year to submit grant reimbursements. Because if there are issues identified, you do risk losing out on those funds. This is just an overview of the 2018 compliance supplement. These are the 12 areas that an auditor would look for when auditing for those federal grants. We have noted issues specifically with procurement, suspension, and debarment. Starting this fiscal year 2020, grant reimbursement requests will be randomly selected for additional review. So this additional review will include documentation that may include copies of the canceled checks.
Hold on one second.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, just to go back. In Title I, I have salary employee who our contracts are 24 weeks, so they get paid July 15th, July 30th as well, would be the last paycheck. To get reimbursed, because I have their entire salary under there, do I need to pay them all out by July 15th, or is there a way to show that they will receive another payment?
For Title I?
Well, but the reimbursement deadline for Title I is June 30th, but my employees are paid by contract every 2 weeks, and that means they will receive their last paycheck for the 18-19 school year on July 31st, but the deadline is prior to that.
But for accounting purposes, it's actually being accrued back to June 30th. So it's included in your expenses, or it should be included in your expenses if properly recorded.
How do I show that I'm going to pay them if I'm trying to?
So you can submit the payment, the verification of payment after that.
Okay.
Yeah, but the expenses are already in there and included.
Documentation for the Title I grant is due by July 8th. If it doesn't get paid out until July 30th, how do we submit the documentation that it's been paid?
The only piece of the documentation that you wouldn't be able to submit is the actual payout, and you explain that because they're, right, and they're paid out over 12 months, but you can provide everything else but that piece of it. So you just need to add, that's where communication comes in, that you just have to be clear. You wouldn't withhold the whole reimbursement because you're just waiting for 2 pay periods in order to be paid.
Great, thank you.
So again, the documentation that may be requested will include,
Wait, you can't move on yet? Hold on.
I don't know if this helps, but Title I has always, we've done that historically, and Title I always made us pay everything out by June 30th. So we had to issue those summer paychecks by June 30th. Now, next year, I think they have something new where you can, and some of the schools already are doing it, where you can, or where they're saying you can note on your monthly or your reimbursements how much money you're holding out for summer pay, and then they'll be able to reimburse that, and the teachers would be able to be paid over 12 months because our Title I teachers we have to pay over 10. I don't know if that helps.
Okay, I'll speak with the director of Title I, and we'll get back to you with a clear message.
so the documentation that may be requested will include, or may include, copies of the canceled checks, bid documents, purchase orders. We're going to be ensuring that you're following your purchasing policies and financial accounting policies and procedures, state and federal guidelines as well. Because if there's an audit, the district will get an audit finding for that. So we have the responsibility to make sure that you are following those policies and procedures. Back to Title I. So here we have understanding Title I comparability. So general funded staffing at Title I schools must be the same as non-Title I schools. And that can either be based on dollars or staff ratios. Here for the School District of Palm Beach County, we use staff ratios. So starting in FY17, Department of Education required that charter schools be included with district schools. From what I understand, this was at the detriment to charter schools because district schools have lower ratios. And that affected the charter schools negatively as in regards to Title I comparability. And then date certain, basically we look at your FTE and instructional FTE for the last day of the October survey period. So please remember that we use data entered into PeopleSoft. So please make sure PeopleSoft is updated for your staff and their salaries. And now only regular teachers will be counted. Permanent substitutes are not acceptable for calculating Title I comparability.
My salary is like doom. So it's impossible. We did this with Jody Hayes. I talked to DOE, so it's just impossible.
What is your actual question?
It's just in going my salary for PeopleSoft. It doesn't give me the breakdown for all the duties I do. So it's hard. PeopleSoft doesn't recognize me.
This specifically is for teachers. Is making sure that you enter in your actual certified teachers and you enter them in timely, because if you have them entered in because they're pending certification for some reason or the teacher's taking time in order to get that information for you, and you have them entered as a permanent sub, we will not be able to use that permanent sub for Title I comparability purposes. And so since you have a unique circumstance, make sure to reach out to the HR department because that's the information that we use. And so when you do receive communication from us telling us that you're out of compliance and you need to hire 4 teachers, because that did happen to at least a couple charter schools last year, you need to make sure to do that timely because we will withhold your Title I funding. And you don't only put your Title I funding at risk, you put the whole Title I allocation for the whole entire district, including all of your peers in this room at risk. Because that's the threat that DOE has given us, that if you're out of compliance, then they're going to withhold our whole entire Title I allocation.
I believe she covered the last part there. So now we'll move on to the charter school revenue worksheet. So this is basically just from the June 2019 payment sheet. We haven't received the updated template from DOE yet for the upcoming fiscal year. I do understand that the base student allocation is increasing by roughly $70 to $75, and the district cost differential will change. So this is just the first section, base student funding. And section 2 involves your ESE guaranteed allocation.
I did want to mention also the cost factors are changing slightly too. So you will see a change there as well.
Section 3. Now this is where we calculate the charter school's unweighted and weighted FTE percentage when compared to the district, so we know their proportionate share of the categorical funds. So basically we'll take the charter school's unweighted FTE total and divide it by the district's total UFTE, and the same for the weighted FTE. And this is the categorical section. So this is where we input the district's total categorical allocations, and we multiply it by each charter school's particular proportional share, and then you get your revenue. And there are some changes to the categoricals, which I'll discuss on the next slide. But digital classroom allocations, there's been changes made to. Best and brightest has been added to FEFP. Number 13, the reading allocation, that's what the CRRP survey is for. And Heather also touched on the mental health assistance allocation and the Safe Schools allocation and the requirements for those. So as far as changes are concerned, there was a new categorical added called Turnaround School Supplemental Services Allocation. From my understanding, it was said that charter schools were not eligible. I am not sure of the specifics, but if you would like to contact DOE and ask. Best and brightest, no longer a state grant. Once we get more information of how it will be paid out and how submitting documentation will be handled, we'll pass that along to the charter schools. And then the digital classrooms allocation has been nearly eliminated. So on this previous slide, the allocation is roughly $2,900,000. And for next year, it's decreased roughly $2,500,000. So the allocation for next year is around $370,000 for the entire district schools and charter schools included. We have our class size reduction categorical. Then we come to transportation, Florida Classroom Supply Assistance Program, and food service allocation. For the purposes of this sheet, only the transportation portion is used. And to the last part, the administrative fee calculation and the monthly payment. So to calculate your administrative fee, it's up to 250 students of unweighted FTE. So you would take those 250 students and divide it by your total unweighted FTE, multiply it by your total calculated revenue there, times it by 5%, and that should give you your 5% administrative fee there. And then once we subtract the administrative fee, you have your total estimated revenue. And basically, as the months go on, the sheet calculates previous payments made, remaining estimated revenue, number of remaining months, and the current month's payment. So now resources and key takeaways. So this is just a list of resources available on the district website. The grant deadlines list is on there. Current and historical FEFP payments and federal grant reimbursements are on there as well. Job aids for charter schools to order from the district warehouse, copies of the ACH form that you need to submit at the beginning of the year, as well as links to the charter school revenue worksheet and the charter school capital outlay allocations from the Florida Department of Education.
And And I just wanted to also highlight, so the district website is really a tool for you. So if there is something that you would like to have us include on the website to avoid you having to call us for some reason, we will add it. So anyone who's not using this website, it really is to your detriment. We put the payments on here. As soon as we release the payment to the charter schools, the revenue worksheets are out there for you to verify and check your information. It really is a tool for you as much as it is a tool for us. So please, you need to make sure you're utilizing the information on that website and also share it with your auditors as well.
I'll do a quick discussion about authoritative guidance. This is just a list of all the guidance available. The first three are of the most importance. We have 218, which is determination of financial emergency. Then we have the charter statute. I'm sure everybody knows that one. 1002 is deteriorating financial condition. And then 1013 is for capital outlay. As far as the rules go, we have the district's responsibility to determining deteriorating financial condition, and the Rule 69I for your annual property inventory. And also important is your charter school contract. Please make sure you have a copy of that. You read through it to know your responsibilities, as well as the responsibilities of the district. So now just a general run through of everything we discussed today. There were changes made to the unaudited financial statements template. Charter schools, if they have a management company, will be required to upload a copy of the most current management agreement. Charter schools that receive a partially meets or does not meet on an annual financial review will be required to prepare a corrective action plan and submit it to district staff. Depending on the nature and severity of noncompliance, they may have to submit it to the school board for approval. Remember, please make sure that your auditor does not identify your school as a component unit of the school district, or we will reject the audit. Auditors that are not members of the Governmental Audit Quality Center will be reported to the district audit committee. Just like we did this year with the requesting canceled checks, we will be doing random financial policies and procedures compliance reviews next year, as well as grant reimbursement requests and reviews. The Charter Fiscal Oversight and the Budget Department will have to present the annual financial status of charter schools to the School District of Palm Beach County Audit Committee. Hold on a second.
The question was, when is that going to be done? I don't have the date as to which audit committee we'll be presenting at, but we can send that out to the charter schools once they put us on the agenda. It was at the request of the Inspector General to comply with their policy.
Please note the changes to some of the FEFP categoricals. They're listed there. Please remember to upload your fiscal year 2019 educational facilities and security grant reimbursement requests, as well as your restart grant reimbursement requests. Remember, it's due by June 30th. Please remember to upload the non-capitalized inventory we discussed this morning. That is due June 30th. If you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to call or email me. I'll be happy to answer them. And then please remember that the charter schools are required to maintain support for the Florida Auditor General, Inspector General, or for district audits and reviews. That includes for FTE, FEFP categorical expenditures, etc. Remember that using a management company does not eliminate the responsibility of the school's board or administration from fiscal oversight. If you don't understand your financial statements, please ask your accountant or your management company to explain them to you. The governing board and management are responsible for fiscal oversight of the charter school. Please provide explanations in as much detail as possible. And make sure you use that financial checklist to possibly avoid a financial corrective action plan. Again, the more detailed explanations you can provide, the better. And please make sure to build up a reserve, build up your fund balance to address contingencies. So if there's another natural disaster, another hurricane, you receive an audit finding, or there's just sudden drop in enrollment, that you have those reserves to compensate. And this is the contact information for Heather, myself, Sharon Kovner, and then Rick Ogunski, who's not here at the moment. He's the one who handles charter school payments. Any questions? Yes, Renata?
Oh, wait, you have to wait, because since this is being recorded, that's why we need to make sure that we have them, use them.
Okay, no problem. So I have two questions. One, I thank you for the grant and helping me out, Sharon and you. I appreciate it when we did that grant for the hurricane, so I do appreciate it. I'm not an accountant, nor do I want to be an accountant, but thank you because, you know, that's not my field, but I appreciate it. My second thing on the one slide that you had on Safe Schools, on over the Safe Schools allocation, when it was a lawsuit with Renaissance Charters and the district, and I wanted to know, where does that extra bill, or where do I send that extra bill to if I'm over my safe allocation? Because you're saying that they both have to be zero, but I'm over the amount of that. And so I want to know what's going to happen if I haven't, you know, who do I send that bill to?
Okay, so you would complete the survey as you're required to complete the survey. The charter school is responsible and is receiving their fair share and pro rata share of the Safe Schools allocation. And so as I stated in the beginning of the meeting, charter schools are responsible for funding that. Are there any other questions? Well, you said you had one more.
Yeah, I had one more. It was basically on the mental health allocation. You said it's going to be inputting, but on the Safe School allocation, when there's supposed to be an officer in the school, I thought, according to what I read, that the district was going to send us one, and so I thought that that money that I spent over the safe allocation is over, so I didn't quite get your first thing, what you were saying.
Well, I can only tell you, based on my understanding, is that charter schools will be receiving their proportional share of their Safe Schools allocation in FY20 as they did in FY19. Whatever option of the 4 options you choose to implement, the charter schools are responsible for funding that. And since there is litigation, and that is pretty much all I can answer. And if you have any additional questions, you can certainly reach out to your attorney. And what is your second question?
No, it was on mental health, but it was answered already.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, I think on Renata's point, what we understood the judge's decision to be was that the school district was going to supply an officer to each charter school. Now, I understand that who was going to pay for it wasn't determined because the judge said that that wasn't what was before him. But our understanding was that the school district was going to place those officers.
So what I recommend you do is look at the letter that was sent out to all the charter schools on June 5th, and there is additional information in that letter. And that really is all that I can speak to. And right, but that's all I can speak to is I have to refer you back to that June 5th letter, and it does outline what the responsibilities of the charter school as well as the school district. So I'm surprised, no other questions?
I think I put everybody to sleep.
All right. No, William, I think, did a great job. I mean, that's a lot of material to cover in a little less than an hour and a half, so we got you done early. Hopefully it was comprehensive. That was the purpose of this. If you have any questions, because I'm sure you have just unique situations at your school, please reach out to William. And please understand and give us some understanding that we are a compliance function. We're monitoring to make sure that you are performing what you're supposed to be doing. And it's difficult from the perspective of William and Bo Sharon. A lot of what we're saying is no, you're not doing it right. You know, a lot of what you hear is the negative, but there are a lot of charter schools out there that are doing the right things. And unfortunately, we're not as good with the positives. And so we're going to try to work on that. And especially with the report that we present to the audit committee, we're going to make sure to highlight those schools that are doing an outstanding and great job. And so if you, like I said, if you have any questions, we really truly are here to help. You might not like our answer, but just understand we really are truly a compliance and fiscal oversight and monitoring function. All right, well, thank you all for coming. And if you did not sign the sign-in sheet, please make sure to meet up with Sharon to sign it when you leave. Thank you.